Medicine star Letitia is slamming Dr. Mimi on social media, claiming that people behind the scenes were trying to have her film at Dr. Mimi's office in order to make her look crazy. So in response to what a comment said that Dr. Mimi and Steve were not her friends, she says, "We were never real friends. They were cast and we were asked to invite them onto the show. There were even plans for me to film in her office, which I refused. I heard it through the grapevine that they wanted to have a storyline with me seeing Mimi and painting me to be crazy. Funny how some call themselves, quote, real friends, yet plan an entire season without even consulting you of what the plans are."
Things simply spiraled out of control on Married to Medicine. Trust me, this is the kind of drama you want not to miss. The betrayals, lies, and covert alliances of the most recent season have escalated. Dr. Gregory and King's tense events on their couple's getaway, things meant to remain behind closed doors, have caused fallout that is now evident in the open. What was meant to be a straightforward couple's getaway became the explosion we never saw. Everything seemed calm at first. The group was laughing, chatting, and enjoying the trip until Dr. Gregory and King's underlying tension started to show. There had been rumors about issues in their relationship for weeks before the retreat, but nobody expected it to explode so drastically. The fight started suddenly. It was not just a straightforward argument that Gregory lost. The obvious tension between them made the intended private conversation a hot confrontation. Seemed like the entire room was holding its breath. The argument got heated, then the next thing we knew, Dr. Gregory took it to the next level by submitting a report. He did not merely leave the conflict or try to mend things, he made it official. Thus, the whole group understood that this was a betrayal in the making rather than just a spat. But the drama didn't stop there. The group remained split. Sweet Tea left entirely in the cold. She discovered she was in the middle of the fallout and things got much worse. After Dr. Gregory's graphic report caused things to change significantly and Sweet Tea started to suffer, her long friend Quad started to distance herself. Now Quad seemed dubious of Sweet Tea's allegiance, which caused friction between them. Sweet Tea was alone and seemed to have been left behind in the middle of a storm she never started. But what truly stung was the new friend Sweet Tea had been leaning on, not only the fallout with Quad. Mimi appeared on the surface as a helpful friend, someone who would have Sweet Tea's back and no matter what. But as we got to know Mimi, it wasn't just the falling out with Quad. Sweet Tea dealt with another betrayal, and this one hit more than the others. Sweet Tea thought she had a ride or die in Mimi, but she had no idea Mimi was already engaged in another game. Initially, Mimi gave Sweet Tea words of hope, telling her she would be there through it all. But as time passed, the warmth between them began to feel cold and far off, and that support descended into sarcasm. Then, when the cameras rolled, Mimi started to actively undermine Sweet Tea. It was as if the producers had given her a storyline and Mimi performed her part to perfection, turning against Sweet Tea in front of the cameras. Viewers could see how much Sweet Tea's apparently straightforward friendship had turned into a calculated move by Mimi, and Sweet Tea was left picking up was like a slap in the face. Sweet Tea felt alone already, but the real betrayal struck when Dr. Heavenly remained silent during her most trying times. Whether it was praising someone or criticizing their shortcomings, Dr. Heavenly had always been one to choose a side and have her voice heard. This time, she stayed quiet. Sweet Tea, who had been leaning on her for help, was left totally vulnerable to the group's critical comments. The woman who had been a friend and mentor turned ghostly, leaving Sweet Tea to fight her battles by herself. The drama did not only linger on Sweet Tea, viewers were now at war with it. Sweet Tea became a lightning rod for criticism as the fallout from the couple's retreat and her friendships going sour spilled outside the boundaries of the show, viewers shared on social media. Sweet Tea discovered she was under continual attack from both fans and even fellow cast members as public opinion changed. Sweet Tea became the villain in the eyes of many, and the more she tried to defend herself, the more she was labeled as dramatic. The negative comments were relentless, and the support she once had seemed to vanish. The backlash became so strong, Sweet Tea could not escape the constant barrage of insults and harsh critiques. Scenes were cut, and her side of the story was deleted behind the scenes as the producers were occupied opposing Sweet Tea. Sweet Tea wasn't part of the story the creators wanted to share. It was obvious they had one. The producers altered the show to make Sweet Tea seem even more isolated, so distorting the narrative to make her seem like the troublemaker instead of presenting the whole picture. She was not going to give them what they wanted. This made Sweet Tea a target by refusing to conform to their narrative. She became a problem for the producers, and they made sure they cut her out in any way they could. Sweet T's refusal to give the producers the big meltdown moment they were hoping for only seemed to intensify their attack on her. Her story from her side of the events was buried, and Sweet T was shown in the worst possible light. Having all the odds stacked against Sweet T, she decided to handle things personally. She was not going to let the producers control her with the public opinion already turned against her. Instead, she turned the tables by telling her side of the story on social media. Sweet T reclaimed her story using the very venue used for attack. She began revealing the truth by live posting videos and personally interacting with her supporters. Sweet T told her side of the story, detailing how much of her reality had been distorted for the benefit of drama and how the producers had altered the footage. She was unreserved. She grabbed hold of her story and began to mend her relationship with her supporters by presenting the unvarnished truth of the events they had not seen on television. Sweet T was able to reconnect with people who had been challenging her character thanks to her raw and real live videos, which gave fans a look behind the scenes. Speaking out, Sweet T turned the tide and allowed her to take charge of her narrative in a manner none had predicted. But Sweet T was against more than just the producers. Mimi wasn't done yet. Mimi doubled down, planting even more rumors to guarantee Sweet T stayed in the hot seat. She wasn't going to let her name be easily cleared. Mimi went on an attack, disseminating false tales and rumors about Sweet T to keep the drama alive, as though things weren't already bad enough. Sweet T had just started to dominate her story, but Mimi was not about to let her get away with it. Rather than allowing the truth to settle in, Mimi persisted in spreading lies in an attempt to hide Sweet T's prospects for success. Mimi worked harder to control the circumstances and keep Sweet T on the defense, and the more Sweet T rebelled, the more this was about ensuring Sweet T stayed the villain in everyone's view, not only about defending herself now. It felt like Mimi was playing chess, moving pieces and generating distractions every time Sweet T made a move to clear her name. The rumors were like wildfire, turning public opinion even further against Sweet T. Sweet T had been through worse, and this was only another round in the struggle. She was not going down without a fight. Then everything changed when something no one noticed blindsided Sweet T. Sweet T was unaware of a private conversation that was finally coming to light. The twist was more detrimental than anyone could have predicted. In what could only be characterized as a deliberate action, someone had covertly captured Sweet T documenting her personal thoughts and conversations. The real shocker, though, came when the tape was altered and put on public view in a way that utterly twisted her words. She didn't know it at the time, but those words were being used to destroy Sweet T. She seemed to be the ultimate villain, the kind of person she had worked so hard not to be. Whoever had recorded her was obviously looking to expose her at her lowest. Thus, Sweet T would not be able to avoid the damage the edited version caused. Sweet T wasn't ready to let the world define her. Even if she had done nothing wrong, the recording made her seem completely different. Not holding back, Sweet T entered the last cast event prepared to face everyone who had been opposing her. Sweet T knew this would be her last opportunity to stand up for herself, and she wouldn't let the lies and treachery slide anymore. At this point, she had nothing to lose. The room was tense, and you could sense the hostility in the air as Sweet T headed to the front, prepared to clear the record. Her stirring address was much awaited by the audience. Sweet T revealed all the lies, false alliances, behind-the-scenes manipulation occurring for months, not just calling out Mimi or Dr. Heavenly. The room was silent as she laid it all open, displaying the world exactly how much she had been wronged. None was safe from her truth. Sweet T had spent enough time battling for a narrative that wasn't even hers. So at that moment, she was exposing the truth about Dr. Heavenly and everyone else in the room, not only defending herself. Now she was ready to leave with the ability to govern her own life. And as for Dr. Gregory's lies, they were revealed, but Sweet T had permanent damage. Though the show might have ended, the actual narrative is still being written. Do you guys believe Sweet T was really the victim, or did she get exactly what she was due? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with the next twists in this. Drop your ideas in the comments below.